Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is Matthias Sutter, who is the GM, the General Manager of the famous Shangri-la Hotel here in Tokyo. And we're in a beautiful restaurant here in the hotel. So thank you for hosting us today.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, well, you're in the hotel trade. You've probably been in that your whole life. But give us some of the background of how you came to be running the Shangri-la here in Tokyo. What's the background, how you got here and doing that?
How far do we go back?
Well, go back as long as you like. Yeah, give us some background on you.
Maybe, thank you. Maybe all the way back, obviously from Switzerland, born and raised in Switzerland, a small little town where we greet each other by name when we see each other on the street. Then different sports, lots of sports. I was also in a golf team, wanted to make golf my profession, but in Switzerland that's a bit... my father said, yeah, you can play golf, but what do you want to do for a living, right? So that didn't work out. And then changed into the architecture, studied architecture as my sponsor, was an architect, but then figured out very relatively quickly that there are others who are much more talented than I am. And on the side, I was always a bit in the entertainment. I hosted wine dinners at home, wine tastings, and was always with the F&B part very strong, connected. And then till actually my father said, why don't you become look into the hotelier angle? And then so I did the hotel management school. After hotel management school, I worked a little bit in Switzerland and then quite quickly went to the States a couple of years. And then to Hong Kong, Asia, and that's about 24 years ago. And then obviously pretty much classic through all the big cities, worked my way up, become a GM I think about 10 years ago now. And then Tokyo is actually by choice. So after a while, along the way, I met my wife. Along the way, we gave birth to Adriana and Sebastian, two lovely twins of 10 years old. And then you have to ask our question, where do we want to raise them? And there was actually Switzerland is always on the map. And for my wife and I was actually Japan on top of the map as well. And we thought that's kind of a neutral ground. Mm-hmm. As I feel the values in Japan are the same as in Switzerland, even though the culture is so different. Mm-hmm. The values are the same. And my wife's still in Asia. So
is your wife Japanese? Or?
No, actually she's not. She's Malaysian.
Originally,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even though she only lived, I think, 2-3 years in Malaysia.
Oh, really?
But Malaysian.
Well, I guess for the family, very safe place, relatively safe place, Tokyo, and sophisticated, modern. It's got, probably got very good schooling potential here, so it makes sense to be here. And in terms of when you had been running hotels before in other parts of the world, and then you came to Japan, what sort of things did you notice about leading in Japan that was maybe a little bit different or challenging, perhaps, compared to other places?
You see, it puts a big smile on my face because I think it couldn't be more different. I came from Thailand. So I was in Phuket in a resort, which is very, if I may say, probably more on the laid back. Most of the guests are leisure guests. You go to the Tokyo, one of the leading cities for business trips as well as leisure. Very, very different. And the simple example is maybe the town hall meeting with the staff. In Thailand, every town hall meeting is a party. So people dress up and looking forward to and singing, dancing, food. While a town hall here is a serious matter. Right? This is something where the associates comes and wants some information and know-how, and the expectation they are much higher, if I may say so, and very different. I mean, I wouldn't compare them with each other, but very, very different. And what I realized quickly is that throwing a question in the room doesn't get necessary answered back quickly. So that was something took me a while, and still I'm adjusting to it, to be honest. That obviously the free immediately speaking, the raising the hands, asking a question is not something embedded in the culture here.
I'll give you a hint on that one, because as a training company, we have the same problems, right? We have people come into the rooms, and if you ask a question, like everyone's looking at their shoes, it's all silent. But so what we found was ask people to think about the question. In a moment, I'm going to ask you a question. Please have a think about your reaction, your thoughts to this question. Just keep it to yourself or write it down if you like. And you pose the question, then you wait. Give a couple of minutes, and you don't do anything, just wait. and then we say, what did you think? What did you come up with? And then when you ask that way, people will tell you, because now they've had some time to think about it. They're not caught ambushed or don't have an answer. They know they're going to have to come up with an answer, so they're prepared. And people are more likely to give you an answer that way. So we found in training that works quite. In our training, we get them to write it down. And we just say, what did you write down? Which again is very low, very soft. So yeah, that's always an issue with getting questions answered in Japan. So apart from that, I remember, I don't know if you ever met him, but GM for the Hilton in Nagoya when I was there, was a gentleman also Swiss, Heinz Schwander. And he'd worked throughout Asia. He'd opened a lot of hotels in Asia. And he was always very quick to compare. He could compare work roles across countries and work out, the productivity and speed and accuracy and productivity, profitability, all this sort of stuff. He was all constantly measuring these things. So he would compare Japan, how it ranked compared to the other hotels he'd been in. And I just wondered if you had the similar experience. You could sort of compare roles in a hotel, how someone would be doing it effectively or speed-wise or quality-wise or profitability-wise in different roles across hotels, and how Japan sort of stacks up in that regard.
I think each hotel is obviously very different, right? And also some are a management contract, some are owned. Here we are in a lease contract. So you have different components, but definitely obviously the experience you bring along doing your career marks you, makes you the leadership which you are. I have to say, even though I am at this stage most experienced in my career, at the current stage I am, I also feel like this is the stage I still learn the most, which is exciting for me, because I think one thing in Japan is really to listen. Yeah. You need to get everybody's involvement in it, and like sometimes we ask a question and the answer doesn't come back. You need to be patient, like what you said with the writing down, or just wait and give time. And that's what maybe as a European and as a Swiss, maybe the Germans are similar known for it, not really our strengths. Patience is normally not our strengths, and patience is, I think, what in my 4 years now here, I have to say the moments I was most successful was when I had the most patience. But not the patience, the patience to the others, the patience to me understanding the others. So that's what I benefit the most. So actually, back to your questions, how I compare the different cultures. Not so, there is an element here and there, but I wouldn't say I can take this one here and adopt it here. Because I think Japan is just really so different in many aspects. And
in terms of, you think about when you first arrived here, was it your first time in Japan to
No, actually,
leave?
Third time.
Third time. So you've been here twice before.
Yes,
in
short,
other.
But for opening, so very, very short. Actually.
Oh, okay. So opening. So that's a little bit different.
Yes.
Actually, being the GM and responsible for the show.
Definitely.
So when you first came here, and you're the new GM, so they've probably been here quite a while, most of them. You turn up, you're the new GM, just before COVID.
Yes.
Just before COVID, when places packed and things are going really well. And how did you approach that? How did you think about, okay, yes, I've been in Japan before, but this time I'm going to be here for quite a long time. I need to, imprint my direction on this organization. I need to build a team. How did you approach that? What were you thinking? Did you have like a 90-day plan or a year plan, or how did you think about it?
I think the conditions are very simple, different. First time 20 years ago, it was for a pre-opening, 3 months here. Second time, I was supposed to be longer, but the tsunami came, and I think I left about after 8 months. Now this time was to come here with the specific interest to stay for good. So I think that puts a very different perspective how you touch everything. Often GMs are sent to a country, they know they're 2-3 years there, let's maximize these 2-3 years and then I go. While actually from the first day I came here, I'm thinking of the long term. And I think by thinking of long term, the commitment the family gives to it, it also, the team can feel it. The team can feel this is not a leader or a GM who is here for 1 or 2 years. This person, if I may say, sticks around for a long time. So let's give each other time. And that's that made already the way I interact with the team very different, because I didn't demand answers quick as I used to do in the past. Or in Korea, right? Korea is all bali, which in Korea you can do, but here again it's about creating a relationship. And I have to say, creating a relationship through trust. Trust takes time, and COVID certainly didn't help in that aspect, because in our industry we need to sit together, we need to spend time together, which COVID didn't allow. But again, through the time through, it has proven, and now I have to say, I have the best team I ever had.
And I guess too, when you have a broader or a longer time frame, you also have an accountability. You know, in any sort of functionality where you are through 2-3 years, the tendency is to run the machines full pace for 3 years, and then you're out, and any maintenance or breakdown or problems, not your problem, because you've moved on, right? But here, if you run the machines hard and things start to break down, you're still here, you're accountable for that. So I guess your own mentality around the responsibility, accountability component is stronger there too. You're not just going to come in, blitz it, and then you're out. You've actually got to see what happens after that too. Yeah.
Very, very true. Very true.
Yeah, and in terms of thinking about, particularly also I guess for a Japanese team in this industry, they know that the GMs come from overseas. They come for short periods of time, and they know that okay, they're going to move on. So maybe I don't have to change too much myself. I can just fly under the radar a little bit, and then they'll be gone and get back to normal, or wait for the next one. And particularly if they don't know anything about Japan, that's even better, because then we can sort of baffle them with Japan for a while. But in your case, you're going to be here for the longer term. You think about it differently. In terms of trying to get the team engaged, get the team working well with you, working as a unit. What have you found things, like you mentioned before in, I think it was Phuket, you're in Phuket,
yes.
was it?
Yeah.
The town halls are like a real activity, right? It's a real festival actually in a way.
Yes.
And I've been in Phuket, I can understand how that would work. And so, there's that sort of team building aspect to it. Whereas here you say the town hall's a bit more formal. So what things have you found works well to get a team engaged in Japan?
I think at the end we're dealing with human beings, right? And wherever you are, and the values and the importance is the same. And I think in Asia more than in the Western world, the sincere care you're providing goes a long way. I had a little bit, the last 3 years during COVID, we had some of our board members moving on just naturally. And we have 8 board members, and 6 of them moved on. And during the last 3 years, the number 2s actually took the responsibility of the number 1 without being promoted. And some of them a year, some of them actually 3 years. And within the last 9 months, we were able to promote all of them to number 1s, right? So actually, the team I have now is, I can't say young, they have the right age to be there, but they're young in their position, and extremely committed, and we grow together through it. I think the fact that we had October, November, December, the strongest in 2019, the strongest quarter ever in history of this hotel. Then we go together through the worst time ever in history, except tsunami. Tsunami was rather short compared to COVID. And now we are the first quarter of 2023. We're riding the strongest quarter in history again.
Wow.
So it's really, if you
Congratulations.
look at the roller coaster, it's not necessarily because of top line, it's because the way over the last 3 years, we really evaluated and how we do things and what is being done, what is important. And obviously the demand in town helps tremendously as well. But so we actually had a success, went through, I wouldn't say hell. It had also its beauty, to be honest, the COVID. Maybe not so much professionally, but privately. I think everybody had some valid time there. And now going through this, hitting one record after every month is just kind of a recognition of what we have put together the last 3 years. And that really bounced, and success always bounced the team, right? I mean, having a team, a successful team is always tighter than a team which is not successful, so to say. Who likes to fail, right? No. So at this moment, again, that's why I can say I have the best team I ever had so far.
In terms of engaging that team or the broader team, you know, from sort of the most senior people right down to the most junior people, you know, do you have sort of lunches with people? Do you have, you know, drinks with people? Do you do things together? Do you have events? I mean, in the past, pre-COVID, there were a lot of things people would do to get that engagement.
Yeah.
And COVID sort of cancelled everything, stopped doing that, everyone's at home. Hotels, you're not going to be at home, but for a lot of business, they're at home. We're at home. And so what things have you found works in terms of, you know, really getting apart from the success part and, you know, that you talked about, apart from that, actually bringing the team together as a unit?
No, that's good. I think we picking up a lot of things again. I mean, one thing was we did on Friday our cultural lunch. What it is one of the colleagues. At the moment we don't have so many foreigners, but still, one of our colleagues chooses a restaurant which is close to his heart or his culture, and then we're joining each other as just a normal Friday lunch together. So my colleague from India, he chooses an Indian restaurant, and then we have lunch together, and he shares what it's all about. I'm from Switzerland, I look for a Swiss restaurant, or not available, then maybe a French or German or Italian, but something, and then we sit down and we kind of, the person who chooses the restaurant kind of shares about it. And I think the key is A, being together, and B, not talking about work. So really about getting to know who is the person actually who has the office next to me, who just reads down the numbers every morning, what else is behind that. So that's definitely something which I can sense works well. Or sometimes just kind of I call them active lunch. Sometimes I just invite someone, say, why don't we go for lunch? Of course, I have a little bit a thought what I want to discuss with him, but actually that's maybe 5% of the whole lunch discussion. So that's for me.
So the objective there is just to get to know that person better. Is that the point? Or?
Yes, and also kind of there's obviously a little topic as well, which I just like to talk to the person, but I think it's not appropriate in an office because it can become too not intense, but just too much focus point, and it's not that important to me. But I like to have the person's opinion, and so I think it's better to have it in a different setting. So and here we have plenty of restaurants to go across, right?
Tons.
And it really is nice to see how much more relaxed my colleagues are outside the hotel.
And in terms of one of the keys to getting creativity from people in their work is engagement. If you care, then you're interested to help make it better. If you don't care, well, you just don't care, right? It's better and worse, who cares? But when you actually have that engagement, people do think about the business. They do think about how can we improve, how can we increase our profitability or our quality or repeat business or coordination or whatever it might be. In terms of that aspect of having creativity from people, because often in a Japanese context, if you try to get people into a formal situation to be creative, what we've noticed is that in a room, the youngest person will defer to people who are older. The women will defer to the men. The juniors will defer to the seniors. So you wind up, often in those situations, capturing the ideas of a very select group of people, but the majority of people are not getting their ideas included. There's no formal way of actually getting them out there. That most people, the systems they use, so you're not really getting the quality of the ideas that are potentially there. But have you found any ways to stimulate thinking? Because as you mentioned before, with COVID making things a little bit less busy, people can think, they have time to experiment. They can, work on things. They've got a bit of time to, not R&D in the sort of scientific sense, but a type of practical R&D. So did anything come up for you in terms of how to get creativity from everyone?
Yes, I think here it's about empowerment. I think when the person feels empowered, he's not waiting to get the answer being delivered. He knows he's empowered to deliver the answer.
Okay.
And that helped me a lot, or helped my team, us a lot, to be empowered and also know, look, it's your decision. And again, it just takes a bit more time in Japan than other countries to get that comfort level in that individual person to make this decision. But I think because I had these number twos, who the number one left and were in charge, they also realized this is an opportunity for me to prove myself. So I'm going to have to make that work. And it's like this, we created synergies. So it's a bit out of the situation actually driven. But what I realized afterwards, the key is empowerment. The key is that the individual knows he can make a decision, and even decision is bad. A famous saying I always have is, we don't rescue life, we don't send anyone to the moon, how difficult can our job be? Right? I mean, and that's what I said to the team always, when you make a mistake, what can happen?
Yeah.
What can really happen? Not that much, right?
Well, on that point too, I think about empowerment, one of the big factors that often hold people back in Japan is around accountability and worrying that there's going to be a backlash or negative imprint on their career future, losing face in front of others. And I make the joke that, for Japanese, I think if they could get their job description written on the back of a postage stamp, they'd be very happy, make it as small as possible, tiniest target possible, so they have less and less accountability. So that issue around, when things don't go well, when there are mistakes, how they're handled, that has a big impact on people's willingness to step up and be accountable. So what have you found works well in handling mistakes? Because this culture is definitely a no defect, no mistake culture. It's a perfectionist culture here. And when people do make mistakes, that's taken very seriously in a lot of Japanese companies particularly. And I've had no shortage of, we teach leadership, of course, have no shortage of people telling me when they were younger, they made a mistake, their bosses throwing ashtrays at their heads and screaming at them in front of public, in front of everybody, like just all the things, just no-nos, right? But it happens, and it probably still happens. But what have you found works well in terms of, dealing with empowerment, but when things don't go well?
What I realized is just the other day, we had a guest who was really, if I may say, unreasonably vicious against one of our departments. And I think in Japan, the government came up with this new term, customer harassment. So, you have also on that side over-demanding guests, which we actually, I have to say, since I'm here 4 years, I can count on 2-3 fingers how often it happened. But it happened just recently, and that individual department leader felt that the department failed because of such strong demands and requests, etc. But what I realized, and that person really started, I would say I would nearly get worried about the mental health of that individual. Yeah. So I went in front of that associate and wrote back to the client and really said, this has to stop. That's not acceptable. Which you don't normally hear a hospitality person communicating like that, right? It's always service, 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 and every mistake is given with a compensation. But often, actually, the mistake may be not on the hotel side. So that's when I actually had to step in and address it and kind of, if I may say, order the taxi for the client. Yeah. And that, I have to say, I realized had a huge impact on that individual department to see if things go sour, he's the GM is here and he steps in and puts things into place. Because I know the team, there is sincere care and mistakes can happen and sincere compensation can be in place. But that was just something which was, I had to say, was a step too far. And I think that was important for the associate to see when something really got bad, he's not alone. That's what I think a leader has also to do.
I mean, that's, as you say, in the hospitality industry, you get that the customer's always right type of ethos. But if it's maybe a mentally unstable customer, are they still right? I mean, if they're actually overstepping the bounds of decorum or, human interaction, should we put up with that? So maybe that's a good example of showing your loyalty to the team and drawing a strict line. But in terms of the sort of helping people to overcome mistakes, recover from them, how they're handled, because one of the things with the creativity part is, yes, we're going to have lots of creativity, we're going to try things, and then when things go not quite right because the innovation process is quite messy, and then whack, slide to the head for making a mistake, mixed messages there. So how do you handle that when you want them to be accountable, want to try new things and then things don't quite work out, because people are observing
Yeah.
what you do next. You know,
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
Yeah.
What's your thinking about that?
In general, I also, we have now apprentice, right? We have 30 apprentices just started with us, and I take a lot of passion and pride into the apprentice, because these are the leaders tomorrow, right? And especially with the current market conditions where everybody looks for talent, this is perfect, a perfect source of talent. And I said to them, I want you to make mistakes. Like, actually, if you don't make a mistake, I'm questioning myself, what is my mistake that my team doesn't make mistakes? Because again, we all know that you only improve through mistakes. So, and we communicated very, very from early days, like I said, from an apprentice, from the first week they're here, we actually want you to make mistakes. And again, how bad can it be? You know, again, there's no life in danger. And sometimes you see a mistake is in progress, but again, you need to balance up how much is the consequences of the mistake and how much is the learning from the individual afterwards when he sees, oh yeah, that was actually really wrong.
Yeah.
So I think in our industry where we have to make so many decisions every day, I mean, with every guest, right? Every guest, from the check-in to check-out to in-room dining, the cleaning of the room, the Wi-Fi, the internet access. There's so many points where you can have a mistake. So, but you also have so many opportunity to recover again. So I think we are a very thankful industry to actually learn through mistakes, because it's human, right? It's human on the end, and it's not that I encourage people to make mistakes, right? But if I see two choices, I rather want to make him the decision and see afterwards, hey, didn't work. And you know what? Sometimes I learn, sometimes even his decision was better, even though like, this is probably not going to work. So often I learn something out of it from my board members when they make a decision, which I would say, that's probably not going to work well, and it does work. And simply often because they know the market very well. I think a very good example is communication, right? In Japan, the written communication, I think, is more crucial than anything else. I mean, COVID is a great example. Anything we write down, and in COVID, we only had Japanese guests. Anything you write down is not an issue, because every Japanese reads the confirmation letter. Our pool, maximum 6 guests. In-room dining, limited to 10 o'clock. 6. We could do anything based on, obviously, COVID, the social distance, and all the requirements from the government. As long as it was stipulated in the confirmation letter, it was no issue whatsoever with Japanese. While the foreigner, when he gets a confirmation letter, 90% don't read anything, right? And why is your in-room dining not 24 hours open? Right, kind of rightfully so, because it's expected, right? But during COVID, it was a bit special. So for me, I realized the power in Japan of written communication, and that's not just towards the guests, also the associates. In the Western world, we think sometimes, okay, there's morning meeting, I address something, everybody knows it, it's done. It's not. I felt in Japan there's so much the opportunity to misunderstand, misinterpret, change the story. Each story has a part of truth, but maybe the outcome totally different. That's why I think it's so crucial here more than ever that you put any decisions, semi-decisions, not just only important decisions, semi-decisions, that you put it on paper and make sure that this is clearly understood, in Japanese and English, obviously.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. it's an interesting point. One of the things we're noticing, anecdotally in society is because the population decline is continuing down. We're down to 122 million Japanese now and 3 million foreigners here. And there's a shortage, from a hiring point of view. And I've noticed that some industries, and hospitality is one of them, have trouble getting people. And so what you can see what's going to happen is that the quality that you can access is not going to be the same as it was in the past. We had multiple people applying for jobs. There's going to be less of those. So you, me, everyone in business who's got teams are going to be dealing with people probably of a lesser quality in the future than today, who are probably less motivated, more inclined to make mistakes. There's probably going to be more trouble. We're going to be taking people because we can't get people, and those people may not be the quality of what we've got today. So our ability to deal with that issue is going to become more and more important, I think, from a leadership point of view. And there's going to be people making decisions which you're going to say to yourself, where's the common sense here? But they don't have the common sense. So what do you think about this, the population decline, impacting the quality of people all of us, not just you, but all of us can hire, and therefore the amount of training we're going to need to give those people? I think your point about writing things down, making it very clear is going to come. That's a really good point. I'm going to think about more of that myself and my own team to do more of that as we go forward, because these things are going to become more critical than they are today. Any thoughts on that?
I think you're right in general, but I think we also have the opportunity here at the Shangri-La, like you said, 122 million out there. I need 250. So you can't tell me there are not 250 superstars out there. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe all we have to do is really becoming an employer of choice.
Yep.
So when anyone says, I want to work in the luxury hotel industry, my goal is in the next few years that people say, Shangri-La. Just Shangri-La has to come on top of their mind first. And then we have the selection again from the talent. Mm. The other thing is the apprentice. Like I said, I have huge pride and I enjoy so much. They are willing, they have a different dynamic. I think you're here 38 years, right? You are way more experienced, but you also, how should I say, you saw more the older generation, right? Mm. Which I haven't had such a big exposure to it. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of innocent.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe not that innocent, but at least I'm meant to believe that innocent, and I have the beliefs in the new generation.
Right.
And I think the team can also sense and feel that, and they are mutually excited to go for it. So you're right what you say in general, but I think for our hotel I wouldn't accept that. And I don't. I will do everything possible that this doesn't fall into that chapter. Mm. I also believe, I think we have to look up more talents from abroad.
Yeah.
Obviously, that then is the language barrier.
Yeah.
So,
but and it's culture, culture.
And culture, yeah. So you have
to culture in the sense of the service culture of Japan and mentality.
Yeah.
You can bring someone who knows how to wait on tables, but that's not exactly transferable unless you have got a broader spectrum on what's going on with the client.
Absolutely,
but Japanese.
You're right, but I said to someone who went up to Niseko, and I heard that this year they had a huge trouble on shortage of labor, right? And this person invests up there, and I said, so how was it? Must have been horrible. Look, I heard 5-star hotels offering 5,000 yen discount if they don't have to make your room because they don't have anyone to make the room. And he says, yeah, it was not good, but you know what? It's still better than many other places in the world. So the level is so high, even if it's not good, it's still...
A worst day in Japan is as good as the best day somewhere else. Maybe, yeah.
Kind of, yeah. So, but again, I don't want to go into that because one of the reasons I'm so passionate about and enjoying it in Japan is because of the quality. Because a China bowl gets wrapped in Mitsukoshi, when you buy something. Because the Shinkansen team, when they clean, in their orange, pink uniforms, I go sometimes early on the Shinkansen just to watch the discipline, the accuracy, the respect. It's just, there's nothing equal anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, well, one of the words to describe a lot of things in Japan is the word kata. I do martial arts karate, and we have kata, which are set forms. Yeah. But a lot of things in Japan are set forms. Yeah. And my wife's Japanese, so I'm constantly reminded that I'm very Australian and I don't follow the set forms, being an Aussie. And she's like, no. it's got to be like this, you know, reading the riot act to me about how it's got to be, and just little things. But I think that's Japan, that attention to detail, things should be done a certain way, and that's it, you know, no argument, that's it. So I think that sort of thing, you know, lends itself to having a consistent quality delivery, which in other countries maybe it doesn't have the same thing. You know, my wife, when she was pregnant, we were in Australia at that time, and she couldn't drink coffee or didn't want to drink coffee or tea. In Australia, so she'd say in the coffee shop, look, I just want hot milk. They didn't have hot milk on the menu. So every day she'd go to this place, the price would change, because whoever was working there would set a price, because there's no guide on what the price is, not on the menu. So
in Australia?
So they get a different price from time to time on the same hot milk. Come back to Japan, coffee shop, I want hot milk. No. It's not on the menu.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's the kata. Yeah. It's not on the menu. Yeah. I don't know what the price is. Yeah. No. Yeah. But the Aussie flexibility, well, I don't know what's on the menu. Yeah. Well, this is, I think the price could be this, you know. Yeah. No consistency. Yeah. But you still got your hot milk. Yeah. So I think kata forms a lot of things in Japan around that consistency of service, which makes it very, very strong here and having that reliability. One thing too about, engagement, giving that creativity is trust. You know, and trust anywhere, any culture, trust is critical. And what things have you found work well in Japan to build trust with the team?
To build trust, I think it's transparency is one. Mm-hmm. Everything I know, my team knows. Mm-hmm. So they know they are always in the know. Mm-hmm. I think there's nothing more distrusty than if you have a leader you think he hasn't shared with you all the information. Mm-hmm. Simple example is, in the past I realized the hotel was rather hesitant in sharing if someone leaves. Mm-hmm. So someone resigned, and then 1 week before he actually left, 3 months later, 2 months or 1 month later, it was announced. But obviously people, human beings, human talk, right? And it creates just different views and gossip on the end of the day. Yep. So I had 2 months after I arrived, I had one of the seniors decided to leave. We had a bit discussion during the 2 months that this was already his plan. And when he actually gave me the form, I said, okay, I accept. We have discussed that and it does make sense for you. I will announce it tomorrow. And he was kind of a bit put on the back step. He didn't expect it. And the next day I announced it, and obviously the team also, everybody was surprised. But you could say, and I could address how much I appreciate his contribution, but he's going for bigger things. And so everything was clear. There was nothing exciting to talk about it. He leaves for a bigger opportunity, but the GM appreciated his efforts and they seem to go good along, and end of story. And I think that's just a healthy culture.
And that, I think you're right too. There's a vacuum. If you don't fill it, somebody else will fill that vacuum with their own story, which may not be anything like or they make up a story or they imagine a story as opposed to part of his career progression. This is part of his plan, and that makes sense, you know. So yeah, that's a good thing. Anything else in trust that you think works well apart from transparency?
2 more things just come to my mind. One is listen. Mm-hmm. I think with listen, you take the other person serious and you listen, not just waiting. Mm-hmm. That helped me also to understand the other side better, right? Because again, often I take Korea again as example, is always bali, right? Very, very fast drive, but actually not so much. I experienced that here is much more a listening part. So I would say transparency, listen, and the last one is, I mentioned before, I think already, the long-term commitment. Right. The fact that I am here for the long term also create, and the interest on the culture and the passion, I think that also creates on the local side kind of, yes, he appreciates our culture. I try to make big effort on the language, on the customs. I go to the Zoom, like all the cultural thing. I love it and I indulge in it. And I think and I try to give as much respect also through that. And I feel that one also shows them I'm serious. I'm not here just for a couple of years.
It's not a superficial thing.
Yes.
So you're going deep. And so I guess one part too is with culture, because organisations have a certain type of culture. There's a corporate culture, so to speak. And then you have location culture and country and town or whatever. And then you have the GM culture that you want to have in the organization. So you have sort of like, I guess, umbrellas of, broad spectrum Shangri-La culture. Then we're in Japan, so it's the Japan Shangri-La culture. And then there's you as a GM culture. So what do you think about driving culture or creating culture from your point of view in this business in Japan? What do you do about creating the culture you want here?
Yeah, I think I have to go 2 steps back. I think, yes, actually, while I was listening to you, said there's the company culture, the country culture, and as a GM. I think as a GM, when you join an organization, you obviously want to make sure the organization is aligned with your values, right? And I have to say here, I am extremely privileged or happy that it's so congruent, so aligned. We are in a family business, right? Our founder, he created a company 50 years ago. Along the 50 years, always his family members have led the company. Now his daughter is leading the company since 2017, if I'm not 16, 17, if I'm not mistaken. So there's always this feeling that you are part of a family, and that's how I communicate. This is our family. So I say to my team, you're my younger sister. She may be older, but because of the hierarchy, she's kind of younger, right? And obviously also not necessarily disliked when you be considered to be younger.
No one's complaining.
Yes. No, so I think that marks a lot on the culture I try to create. I see myself as the coach. My responsibility is that each of the associates can unleash their potential, and I have no interest to go into corporate or be vice president in a head office. For me, it's Japan. For me, it's this property. We opened up Kyoto, second property. We look forward to third property. And through that, actually, my biggest enjoyment is actually when I see my associates growing and reaching their full potential. So and that's the culture I live after. And that's how I treat my associates, my colleagues, or my brothers and sisters, if I may say so.
Interesting. I mean, often just Japan, they describe Western culture as dry and Japanese culture as wet, meaning that human connection is so important, the human relations are so important. And if I think about, I'm guessing, I don't know, I've never lived in Switzerland, I've got no idea, but I'm guessing probably European cultures to a lot of extent, maybe German culture, Swiss culture, etc., quite dry sort of culture. But somehow you've adapted yourself here, or just your own personality you're rather on the wet side for a Swiss, or you're a dry Swiss who's become wet, or how would you describe that journey?
I think half of my life I lived in Asia.
Right.
So
that's had a big impact.
When I always say Swiss, and I'm on the board of the Swiss Jam or the Swiss Club, I'm the delegate for Switzerland. I'm a Swiss representative, as you just can imagine. But people sometimes say you are so not Swiss, right? So I know actually it's funny what you say. I think obviously 25 years or 4 years in Asia marks you married to a lady from Malaysia. Malaysia, which has a very strong Asian culture, like its whole family is about eating. Yeah. I always say the Swiss people, we eat to live, and my wife lives to eat. And
yes.
Took me a while.
Well, I think Asia actually lives to eat, not just in Malaysia, this country too.
So yes, I think you're very right there. I think I'm very lucky having had this exposure, and maybe the personality fits to it also very well. Having said so, I still think the values of Japan and Switzerland are so similar, but the culture is so different. But if you ask me any other culture in Asia, which is very similar to Switzerland, I wouldn't tell you who would be second.
Yeah,
I think it's really, also from an environment, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a passionate skier. Japan is the Mecca of ski, the Shangri-La of skiing in Asia.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, I think, how you say, there's a saying in English, the pot found its lid or something like that.
Oh, maybe, I'm not sure about that. The pot found its lid, but I'll go with that one. I'm not familiar with that one, but anyway, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
But I think, maybe also you're in the hospitality business. It's a very people-oriented business. So I guess if you're too dry, that's probably not a choice that you're going to make for a profession anyway. So I guess you're self-selecting along this, the lines there somewhere. And in terms of, if you were going to give some advice to someone who's going to be sent to Japan, not necessarily the hospitality industry, but just to run an operation in Japan. They don't know Japan, they don't speak Japanese, they're going to be sent here to run it. Based on your experience so far, what would be some success tips you'd have for them? What should they be thinking when they get here?
I think as a patient, I think it's really patience goes a long, long way. And I learned through that, to be honest. I learned so much from the team by just listening. And that's the second part, actually, listening. I think really listen. I think you cannot come with a strategy map and say, look, ladies and gentlemen, this is how we do. And you see that often in corporate world. That's the discrepancy of many of my colleagues who are leading big enterprises here. And then their head offices maybe in Germany or in Paris. And they say, you have to do it like this. And they say, this doesn't work here, right? And I think the small company realized that it doesn't work here like that. So you really have to adjust to the market, like how we do marketing, how we do anything. You know, we say, we have to do an Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, Instagram, Facebook is important, I agree. But what is where's the normal Japanese who sits in the train in the morning, goes to work, goes home? What is he reading on? What app is he looking at? A person like me would never know, right? But we need to know that we don't know. We need to get the person who knows where they're looking at. And I think that's really the key. And I feel Shangri-la has realized that so we really can do a lot on property, and they come with, obviously we get the support from the corporate office. Look, use this, and certain things work very well, and certain things we have to say, I think we need to tweak that a little bit, and they are always allowing us to tweak it because they know it's just such a different market. And even very often, sometimes I have to laugh, even the translation is often forgotten, right? Things get translated from English into Chinese, but then they think, Japanese as well. So everybody thinks kind of Japan, everybody speaks English, like people who have never been in Japan, right? And I think this is something where a lot of tourists get surprised at how, if I may say, how pure it is actually here. Yeah,
and it's always the case of when you're in a foreign country, when you need the English, you can't find any. You need it the most. Where is it? What other things would you suggest to someone coming here? Should they learn the language?
I think learning the language is always good. The reason I just stopped for maybe 1.5 seconds is it's tough. It's tough. I am taking 2 classes a week. Obviously, just sitting in the classes is not good enough. But I say myself, I ask a good friend of mine, I says, how did you learn the language? You know, if it takes me so long, he says, Matthias, just keep climbing. Just don't look down how little you got, how much more you have to go. Just keep climbing. And that's what I do. I said to my wife, she says, don't worry, this is a certain allowance I put aside for my Japanese class. And we just keep doing it because each time I improve Johto, right? It goes a little bit better. And I think every time when you learn a language or you learn hiragana, katakana, it just opens always another door. You know, even when the first time I remember I could read sushi, right? Or sake, you're like, yeah, I made it. So I think it's, the language goes a long way, but obviously I will never be able to do business in this language. Right.
Oh, wow. Hang on. I think you're being too harsh on yourself. It's a matter of time, isn't it? I mean, one of the things I found, Japanese, I'm absolutely guaranteed the person who should not do foreign languages should only ever speak English. And I studied Chinese at university. That was a nightmare. And then Japanese when I came here, and just so hard. But I found that, I said before I like karate, so I found there was a monthly magazine on karate. So I would read that magazine, not all of it, just certain articles, because I had a passion for it, had an interest in it, and that would help me with vocabulary. So I don't know what your hobbies are, but if you can find your hobby or interest and there's something written on that, read that, because that will feed you grammatical structures and vocab on a regular basis, as well as being able to read the kanji. Gradually you'll get more and more kanji. I found that worked quite well, because trying to just get the language at the spoken level and not at the written level, it's too big a gap. You need both, I think, to really appreciate the full range of things you can say here. So don't give up. Keep going with it.
Thank you. Let's do a chapter 2 in 10 years.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. I'm sure you'll be able to do stuff in business here. And again, Apart from they should learn the language, be patient, listen, anything else you'd advise?
It's always we. It's always we.
Okay.
So it's never I. So I think this is something some individuals or some cultures do more hard than others, but it's always we. And which we all know worldwide, right? In business, it's always we, but in Japan, it is definitely we. So there is no chance an I gets anywhere. And it starts when you talk. You know, how do you, or when you write an email, I would like to, we like to, right? So I think, again, the written communication, communication in general in Japan is so hyper sophisticated, or you can say sensitive. You really need to make big efforts to try to, again, understand it and try to adapt as much as you can. And not to be too proud or, this is not so important. Of course, as a foreigner, I think often we get away more than, let's say, my Japanese colleagues who lived overseas come back. They have a more difficult time because it's expected, right? But never take it for granted. I think always do an effort on obviously those etiquettes, so to say.
Also, I think, the point you made before about communication, written communication, and also you said it earlier about, you say something once and imagine at the morning meeting, I think you told them the morning meeting, they've all got it, we're good to go. No. And I don't think that's just Japan. I think that's just general leadership everywhere. And it's always a dumbfounding thing when you think you've told everybody something and then you discover, no, they haven't got it, or they've got the wrong version of it, or they've got part of it. I've got to explain that again. But I think in Japan, particularly when we cross languages, having to repeat things and keep repeating it and keep repeating it and keep repeating it until it actually sinks in it makes it more important here, I think, maybe than maybe in just a single language culture. Yeah. And
I think often the written part is just what I like to add is like, we don't even think, but sometimes when you change a direction, right? Let's say you're changing an operation, the breakfast is not there, the breakfast is here. There are some underlining, really like a minefield where people think like, oh, we're moving it down because the team upstairs is not capable to manage it. So, and that has never crossed my mind, right? And there was out of any question. But obviously, when you write it down, we're moving down because it's easier to accommodate the volume of guests. It protects the other department, which I found obviously very flabbergasting that this can be an issue. But again, with the written communication, you move that totally out.
Well, this is all coming back to the why, isn't it? We sometimes we talk about the what and we talk about the how, and we skip the why part, like, I forgot to tell them the why part. Because, again, people like me, very, like this, like, hey, I want to do this, and boom, 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 and I forget about the why bit. Oh, yeah, got to put the why bit in there.
No, absolutely.
In terms of your definition of leadership, what do you think about, how would you define leadership for yourself?
I think we covered it probably before a little bit with the unleashing the colleagues' potential and having a long-term vision. So, like, I think, and that's exactly what I feel like, I feel like doing now. It's really looking at each individual candidate and where does this individual candidate wants to go, and what can I do to make them getting there, and at the same time, obviously, we settle down here. This is home. What is in 5 years, in 10 years? How does that look like? So I'm hiring people now and have already 2 steps, promotion steps for them in mind. And I think through that relationship, it also creates a certain kind of stability, security. And especially if the person has a family or settled down, then that's the most valuable thing in life, I think, when you know, I have a career path. It's maybe not so much a competition, right? Because you have just, each person has its path, and there's a clear, transparent communication, and also now the PDR is coming, the monthly, the yearly review when you set the goal settings, where do you want to go, what needs to be achieved. I think those are all very, very important management tools, which we take extremely seriously, which are also on apps. You know, I mean, the technology helps us obviously by doing that, so that the individual needs also know what is missing to get there. But that's the plan. We will get there. The question is it 2 years or 5 years? But daijoubu, because the team, there's no plans to restructure the team at itself.
We'll get there in the end.
Yeah.
Well, Matthias, thank you very much. This has been fabulous.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much.
I very much enjoyed your previous podcast with my friend Andrew Hankinson when you did that. That's where I first heard you. And I thought at the time when I was listening to your podcast, I thought, I should get Matthias to come and talk about leading in Japan because he's going to be great. And we finally got there. So thank you very much. And thank you for hosting in your beautiful restaurant here in the Shangri-La. Thank you.
Thank you. True pleasure. Thank you, Greg. And
thank you.
Appreciate it.
So please join us once again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.